I came to the water again today. Something soothing and, I don't know, calming about it. I've had a rough couple weeks. Not even just because of the normal stuff going on, but my chronic illness has flared up on me for the last 2 weeks. And so I've been in extra pain all over for no good reason at all. I'm exhausted and not feeling great in my my mind, and it's just kind of across the board feeling dismal. And stuff I was talking about last week about habits is just what's pulling me forward. I'm still eating well, I'm still doing yoga, even if it's just this tiny little gentle version. Still walking. Because, my God, getting out here, seeing the water, listening to the trees, the few leaves left in the trees, just rustling against each other. The birds out here, the animals out here are chattery today. I saw a chipmunk, haven't heard one. I heard a spring peeper because the weather's lovely again. I've heard a couple chickadees, but what's interesting is that I've been hearing a ton of nuthatches. We have 2 species of nuthatches, white-bellied nuthatch and red-breasted nuthatch. Maybe it's white-breasted nuthatch and red-breasted nuthatch. Yeah. And they've just been chattering in their little nasal tones. I've been hearing some of the small woodpeckers, downy and hairy woodpeckers, but mostly it's just those cute little nuthatches. Blue jay here and there. The leaves rustling under my feet. Stuff I've been thinking about is a little bit how I think I drove my body to pain like this. By spending so many years doing what I thought I was supposed to do, what I thought I needed to do, what I should do, what I had to do in order to be a, adult functioning member of society. I got sick and lost and miserable. And what's just so interesting is that there's so many people who hit that exact same point. I was talking to someone this week, and I was thinking about them on this walk and how their life trajectory has in a lot of ways paralleled mine, or vice versa, and how many people I've met that are the same. What's interesting is that a lot of people have a similar root of having some sort of access to nature as a kid. And an affinity for it, and animals, pets even, and the woods or the desert or whatever it is. And then going out into society, if you like animals as a kid, you can be a vet tech or a vet, and that's it. If you go to school for farming, it's the industrial agriculture machine that you learn about, which all the herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers and giant factory farms, and that's what I did, but that's not what I did. And it's just interesting that there's so many people who are so rooted and used to have such an anchor in nature, and society doesn't. There's no little boxes for that. You can go get a master's and work for Fish and Wildlife, or do research and crunch numbers. Like there's just so little that fits within society for us. I have a feeling it's a lot more of us would feel that way if we had had exposure as a kid. But for those of us who did and then chose, or didn't even choose, I guess, felt that they had to become what their parents expected of them, or I don't know, just had to make rent, it's a big pressure there. Rent and eat, and so we all fall into doing what we have to, what we should, what we need to do, and we can't do anything else, and we have to try to make it work. Man, one of the most impactful things for me along this path to, back to nature, I like to call it renaturing in my mind, is realizing that all those words, should, have to, need to, must, can't, try, they're all handcuffs, they're all ropes, they're all ways to keep us in a cage, I guess. I'm not saying that we mightn't choose to do something like pay rent, because, instead of saying we have to pay rent, well, you don't have to do anything. What are the repercussions if you don't pay rent? You might not want to live with that, so you choose to do it. But, and I know that sounds like elitist freedom, but it's still looking at the repercussions and deciding if you can live with them, and then seeing if there's other ways around it. Sometimes those repercussions suck so much that you gotta keep doing what you're doing just for a while. This person I was talking to, they were really eloquently talking about being caught between culture and nature, and being a I don't know, contributing member of society and doing all the things and feeling deep down that it goes against her true nature. And that pain, honestly, I think that pain is what I feel as a myofascial pain, you know, like a overall muscular joint nerve pain of years and years spent ignoring myself, my drives, my interests, my instincts, going down so many I don't want to say wrong paths, but so many pathways that were not in my really best interest, that, you know, my body up and rebelled, I guess. That's what I usually call it for shorthand. Not just my body, you know, migraines, so mental pain, emotional pain, physical pain. Depletion, dissatisfaction. And it's hard. It's hard to decide that you want to not only find out who you are, but follow that. Those habits are so ingrained. You know, when we first start this process, there's no question about what we have to do to be humans. And it's looking at those super fundamental questions. And what does a human mean? Do you mean a person in capitalist society? A person trying to get ahead in capitalist society? Or do you actually mean a human animal who needs community and can't do everything alone because that's what we're not, or not what we're made to be? Once you start to look at the really fundamental stuff, that just starts the work. Unfortunately, from there, it's a ton of extra things, like deciding that every time you hear yourself say or think should, to just pause a second, or just catch yourself when you're doing something, or when you did something 2 weeks ago that maybe wasn't, you know, went against your instincts, and you realize that you had that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you should have gone right, but you went left instead, even though you felt it. But you know what you get if you go through that process? Momentum. It becomes easier. And then you hit those giant problems that you forgot you even had. The traumas that you've been protecting yourself by behaving in such a way. You know, you were beat up as a kid by the other guys in your grade. And so you live looking over your shoulder, making sure you're never really alone. If you see somebody and you are alone, you have to keep glancing and making sure they're not around anymore. That's not what a human animal is supposed to do. Absolutely, a human animal protects itself and watches out for itself, but that's hypervigilance. That's a trauma response. The knowing where all the exits are, the always having an out, the belief that everybody's out to get you, the fear that if you go into a certain town, you need to be protected. The human animal reacts. That fight, flight, or freeze thing, we react. We have the correct instincts. I'm not saying that you shouldn't protect yourself. But to be hypervigilant means that you've always got, cortisol levels that are so high. That mess with your body chemistry. Make you hurt. Make you tired. Make you feel emotionally unstable. And you hit those things while you're doing this work and you're like, oh shit. And then you push through that, you work through that, and you hit a whole nother level. It's like water going downhill. The more water you have, the faster it goes, the easier it flows. It's a pretty great feeling. And yeah, it sucks to start. Doesn't life suck a lot right now? When you're just pretending and you know you're pretending. You know you're not this person. Working a retail job. Waiting tables. Being a banker. You're not that person. You know you've never been that person. So yeah, it's hard to dig deep. Figure out how to take off all those layers and become you again. Is it worth it? It is to me. I scramble to pay my rent, pay my bills. But I'd rather work at a farm for minimum wage than go back to being an assistant manager at Walgreens. That nearly killed me. Life's about choices. There's no have to. There's no need to, should to, should. There's no can't. You can't do this? Well, maybe you just don't want to. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe it hurts too much. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I respect that. God, I respect all of those things. It's a really pretty area. Going through the dark, coming out into the light. And then you go back into the dark again. And then the light. It's hard. In my experience, it's worth it. Especially if you can find a pigeon to look at. Watch be just a pigeon. If you can look at that city rat and realize that that's a wild rat, figuring out exactly how to live with what it's been given. Have you ever thought about how much they thrive being just themselves in a city. It's pretty wild. I like trees. Talk to you later.